Hello and welcome to this Zoom broadcast of America United International, or AUI. It is Monday, February 28th, 2022, and I am your co-host, Dr. Zena Crenshaw-Logal. We're expecting my, esteemed co-host, Ms. Belinda Parker-Brown. In fact, I think she may be joining us now, but we get started right at the top of the hour. She's a busy lady, so we're going to welcome her into the conversation as soon as possible. In fact, she's connecting to audio. Okay, and let me do a little housekeeping with her. Just one second. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And let me ask my co-host to. We're gonna, well, in just a few minutes, I'm gonna change it to gallery view so you can see us all on the screen, and we'll go from there. But, you know, this is news to my co-host, Ms. Belinda Parker-Brown. We have some real powerhouse guests. Our scheduled guests are such movers and shakers in the movement against abusive adult guardianships that they were speaking in Tallahassee, Florida, at a legislative event, and neither could come. So, we have filling in two more pioneers in the abusive adult guardianship industry, our grassroots reform advocacy. And they're going to be talking to us about that whole phenomenon from a little bit different perspective than our scheduled guest, who was Rick Black, co-founder and CEO of F.A.C.E.U.S, and also Marci Friedman, who is a co-host with our guests, who I don't even want to call them stand-ins, because they're just, they're such leaders, movers and shakers, that, suggesting that they're stand-in, they're just, we're delighted to have them as well. But we're gonna change the format, that how these interviews usually go. But before I get into all that, Miss Belinda, why don't you, I've broken the news to you that we got two new guests. So why don't you come in and make your greetings to the audience, and tell us, you work very closely with Mr. Black. Why don't you tell our audience about what you know about him, and then we can have our guests talk about Marci. Go ahead.
Well, absolutely. I'm kind of, excited with these special guests tonight. Wasn't really looking forward to that. But excuse me, I'm sorry. I did speak with Rick earlier, and he did tell me that they're in the trenches, boots on the ground as normal, with some phenomenal things happening in regards to his work, F.A.C.E.U.S, that he do, him and his wife, and right along with all of his constituents. So I'm elated to have the, you're right, Dr. Z, we're not gonna consider them as standbys. We, these are, people that's very familiar with us and our work, and Luanne and Robin, I'm so happy to, see them once again. We've been on their show before. I mean, just a phenomenal show that they have talking about these issues, Dr. Z. So why don't we do this? Why don't we go and get started? First of all, I would like to welcome everyone, welcome all of our guests. And I'm pretty sure you have well informed them that hopefully someday soon we will have Rick Black, F.A.C.E.U.S, to come in and do an interview with us in regards to how important and how crucial this work that we're doing is to help, change our, change reform our corrupt legal justice system. So, I just want to thank everyone, welcome to AUI's, our broadcast tonight. Is we're going to give the opportunity for anyone. Have you covered all the housekeeping areas with questions and concerns at the end of the show, Dr. Z?
No, I haven't. Do you want to do that part?
Yeah, let's do that part and let everyone know that we'll welcome in their participation with this.
Yeah, so we have everyone. I wonder if there's anybody in the country who's not familiar with a video meeting, a video broadcast. Um, and so what we want to do is encourage our live audience members, and we got a nice crowd tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, if you can you can interact with our speakers through our chat box, whether it's through, you can send messages to Miss Belinda and myself and our guests who, I don't think we've given their names. That's the collateral damage of knowing people so well. Luanne Fleming and Robin Austin. There are the co-hosts, or two of the co-hosts of a dynamic broadcast called Face-Us. We're going to have them explain all the acronyms. But you know that the topic tonight is about dealing with corruption, and the vulnerability of our seniors, when you have unscrupulous people come in and take over their estate through abuses of the probate guardianship process. Um, and our scheduled guests, we're going to talk about that phenomenon from the standpoint of Rick Black, who is one of the leading advocates who are identifying the problems, how the system goes wrong and fails to protect the vulnerable seniors, vulnerable adults from being exploited and having their property and literally losing their liberty through unscrupulous probate proceedings. And then Marci Friedman, who has experienced that firsthand, and also is one of the ambassadors. Well, both are ambassadors of America United International. Well, Luanne and Robin are going to be speaking from that. They both have personal exposure to that human rights violation that happens through guardianships of guardianships over vulnerable adults, usually seniors. But they're going to be talking about it from more of a smorgasbord perspective, because they host a radio broadcast where their guests are some of the leaders in identifying the problem and proposing solutions, as well as talking with many people across the United States who have experienced this tragedy firsthand. Um, so again, go ahead and if you have questions, or if you have any, you want to comment or interact with our guests, do it in the chat. But if you have specific questions, if you could put it under the Q&A portion, you should see that at the bottom of your screen, and you should also have access to it if you're joining us through a mobile device, and so that way we can keep the questions isolated from the general conversation. Last thing I want to say before I want to get into the substance of the program is, usually any of you all who have been part of these interviews know we usually conduct at America United International was what we call a reverse interview process. And it's just been a delightful way of going about meeting new people. But what we do is we give our guests a heads up that we're going to put them to work, that they have to come in and explain before we get into the details or even much of an identification of what they do. They first give they share with our audience their understanding of America United International. Well, to be fair to our guests, because we didn't, have an opportunity to warn them, in advance of this reverse interview process, we literally made arrangements for them to come on. They were so gracious to do that just a few minutes before we got started. So we're gonna shelve the reverse interview process tonight and make this more of a panel discussion and interactive. So I think that everybody will be more comfortable. So let me get every one of us on the screen instead of having, a featured speaker, um, and try it that way. So without any further delay, unless Miss Belinda, unless you have something you want to add, I want to introduce Luanne Fleming and Robin Austin, co-hosts of Face-Us. Are you all ready
Go
for that,
right
Ms.
ahead,
Belinda?
Dr. Zia. Yes, let's go right
We're gonna
ahead and
stay,
jump right in.
we're gonna all stay on the screen, and it's just gonna be a panel discussion. There's a fancy way on Zoom to get us all into a single window. I don't know, I think I'll tinker
I
with
think
that.
Brian have joined us too.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, Brian have joined us,
yes,
and
Brian
I was
Kenter.
waiting on Attorney Austin to join us too. So
Yes, Brian Kenter, one of the leaders of really the family rights movement, but he has been a regular guest on Face.Us, so he's well aware of this organized, deliberate abuse of the legal system, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But let's, Luanne and Robin, welcome. Tell us,
Thank you.
Face.Us. What does that stand for?
Go ahead.
F.A.C.E.U.S is an acronym that we labored over for many days, really, trying to figure out a way to put into words how the legal system abuses people that go to it looking for justice. And it stands for Families Against Court Embezzlement, Unethical Standards. And that, in a nutshell, is what goes on. We have courts that are there because they were instituted as a way to institute justice in our society so that we don't go around shooting each other every time somebody has a disagreement. But the courts have been hijacked by those who now use, under color of law, under the pretense of helping those who come into the courts, they now embezzle using unethical standards. They, in the courts that we are discussing specifically, corruption rules, and there are unethical standards that are the norm. And what this means is that people who go into those courts are blindsided, because in our country, in America, ever since I was a child, I've been raised to have certain beliefs about how America works and how there's liberty and justice for all. And we're independent, and all of these things are slogans that we are taught when we're very young in school. And so we're raised thinking that justice is something that you find through the mechanism of going to a court where things are adjudicated and justice is established. So it was a tremendous shock the first time that I was dealing with the legal system to discover that they made attempts to steal quite a bit from me, and I was able to stop it, but not all of it. And my children had money in a trust that was simply taken, and there was not a thing I could do about that. And there was over $20,000 that was attempted to be taken from me. Luckily, I had evidence in the form of recordings that I brought to bear, and transcribed recordings that I brought into the system. And so they were unable to prosecute that.
Well, let me back you up a bit, Robin, because you made the point that you were blindsided. And so there are going to be people who see this recording and hear us talking about embezzlement. You said court embezzlement. And so we're going to try to lay it out there for the people who may see this interview, so that this presentation itself doesn't blindside our audience. Most of the people who are joining us are very familiar with the phenomenon you're talking about. So we're going to take it one step at a time. First of all, you all talk about F.A.C.E.U.S. The C and the E stands for court embezzlement. Is there a particular kind of court, or is there one court that you're focusing in on, or do you mean any U.S. court? What does that mean?
When our organization began, it was because we saw this happen in probate courts.
Okay.
As we have progressed through the years, doing hundreds of interviews with people and getting worksheets from people that show how things happen, we discovered that this is not just probate courts, but family courts and divorce courts as well. And because we have seen this pattern so widespread, although we have little evidence in our personal experience, I believe that it extends into our criminal courts. I think that it's such a well-established pattern and such a deep criminal element that has invaded the legal system that I cannot see how it could not also be deeply involved in that.
Well, we're going to try to bring, put some, really make that understandable for people who are not directly impacted by this problem. So over the years, you all have branched beyond addressing problems with the U.S. probate courts, and your broadcasts address any court system or court in the United States. How long have you all been broadcasting?
We've been broadcasting for about 5.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's gone international, and we're just very proud of that our word is getting out there. It's been a very successful show, and we come out every Wednesday about 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time, and we're on the Hidden Truth Revealed channel on Blog Talk Radio.
Okay.
And it's we've been bringing on, you've been on our show before. We've had bring on our show. We've had so many people on our show, Brian Kinter, and to us that is one way of helping families find out that if you end up into a probate court, any kind of court, basically, so far, you could be in a lot of trouble. And you go to a court thinking that these people are going to help you, they're going to get justice in your family. Then you turn around and you end up owing 17 attorneys, 2 different kind of courtrooms. In my family, we've lost over close to $3.5 million. We figured out on the prices of today. We were forced off of our property with 120 antique cars. And we had a hard time trying to figure out who was on our side in a courtroom, and there was nobody.
Well, let's try to create some context, because again, we want anyone who was to, view this broadcast to understand what we're talking about, because as Robin pointed out, this blindsided him. This blindsided most anyone who grew up thinking a certain thing about the way our government operates and our courts operates. So, Miss Belinda, I have my kind of legalistic, I don't speak human too well. And so I have my kind of legalistic way of explaining this whole phenomena that they refer to as a court embezzlement. Do you want to give your, how do you explain what it is that we're addressing to help people understand this type of corruption? Because right now they would be thinking, what? You couldn't be talking about the United States of America.
Absolutely, Dr. Z. It's so important, you're right, that we, our listening audience and the people that view this interview or this show would be very well informed and very clear that what we're talking about is when we do have that faith and that hope and that trust in our courts that they're going to do what's right, and that they're going to operate based on, the United States Constitution and the oath that they take. The judge, have the canon laws and different things that they have to follow. Ethical laws and stuff like that are in place. But the truth of the matter is that, after so many years, over 2 decades, my observation in the courtroom have been terrifying. When you see things happening like is what we have named it, it's called the fix. It's when the fix is in, when your lawyer that you paid thousands, if not hundreds of thousands. I had one case where in a child custody case, it was over $2 million that this family was drained out of. Then you got your prosecutor, you got the judge, you got the clerk of courts, you got all of these services, advocate services, child protective services, all of the insurance companies, everybody in cahoots. That's what we say, and the fix is in.
Exactly.
And your lawyer saying one thing to your face and doing something else behind your back. And then when you see these type of things happening, and I had one of my members come out and say, you know, told his attorney, it seems as though to me that you're on their side. You know, and then when you have a situation where the judge is sleeping with your attorney, you know, how do you deal with that?
Exactly.
You know, so that is what we're saying. The fix is in, and we have this, you know, situation where it's just totally unchecked.
Now,
you know,
let me, you know, let me throw in the legal standards, you know, the standards that are established by law. The United States is, you know, any democracy, any republic, constitution-based nation is obliged to, by our U.S. Constitution, and you hear about this kind of terminology on the international human rights community. We're supposed to experience in this country a fair and impartial administration of justice. And you know, that begins with your encounters with law enforcement on the street, and it spans to every level and branch of government. But the branch of government that has ultimate responsibility for making sure that what we experience in this country is a fair and impartial administration of justice is the judiciary. Under the U.S. Constitution, they are vested with the power to resolve our legal disputes, and is ultimately is up to the judges to make sure that, you know, that it's not perfect justice. There can be miscarriages of justice because it is a human institution, but that generally there's a fair and impartial administration of justice. So when you go into court, we all know we've got a legal dispute, and it's based on certain facts, and there's relevant law. So you go in, you have a dispute, and we're going to be talking about how that may happen. And you understand the law, and you have some sense of what your rights are and what your responsibilities are, and what you're expecting is a fair and impartial resolution. And fair has a common sense meaning. You know, that is one, it's amazing to me because, you know, with the law, they have all these technical definitions, but fair is just whatever we common sense, usually the common perception of fair. And then they're supposed to be impartial. So in other words, the judge is supposed, you got advocates what represent one side or another. They're not impartial. You know, if you're there for the prosecution, you represent the prosecution. If you're there for the defense, you represent the defense. So you're not impartial. You're there, and it's an adversarial proceeding. So one side is contending that they're entitled to prevail, but the judge is supposed to be impartial. So what you all are really talking about is an experience that is not fair, and there's a perception that the judge is not impartial, that the judge is biased in favor of one side or another. So that's basically what we're talking about, the lack of fairness and the lack of impartiality. But it goes one step further. It's not just a matter of, you know, a judge that maybe never did like anybody whose name was Luanne, you know. You have people who are partial, they are biased because perhaps they've been bribed, you know, perhaps they're against, they're more receptive to corporations as opposed to their employees. There are any number of reasons for this lack of impartiality. And you have a judge who, instead of making their decision strictly based on the facts, what seems fair and what the law provides, you have an outcome, and the goal is not to resolve this legal dispute. They're accomplishing some other goal, and that may be to punish you because perhaps you're an outspoken critic, of the government. Make sure you get less than what you're entitled to because you're in a marriage dissolution, and perhaps you were married to someone who's politically influential and powerful and you weren't. Then there's the whole phenomenon of this mass incarceration. No one goes to jail, no one goes to prison ultimately without a judicial decision. So you have the question of whether the judges are deciding to maximize, like no vacancy at the local jail, no vacancy at the local prison, because there are people making money based on how many we can get behind bars. So basically you're talking about a legal system that's serving all of these goals that have nothing to do with fairness or impartiality. So, that's where we're going to start, and we're going to go from there. And we're going to try to focus in on the probate courts, because that was our intention to talk tonight about how the probate courts, these are the courts that you go in and they deal with issues such as a person's estate when they passed away. Everyone's heard about going into probate court. They administer your decedent's estate. And you also can get guardianships where, let's say for some reason you're incapacitated and you need someone to be able to take care of your affairs or take care of you physically. Well, that can happen. You can be incapacitated because you're too young, but you can also be an adult and be incapacitated because you have a mental state that won't allow you to take care of yourself physically or your affairs. And then some people become incapacitated because of their age or age-related illnesses. Now, Luanne and Robin, tell us how just getting old becomes the start of this abuse of adult guardianships. You have the guardianship if we say you're old or a senior citizen, you're up in age, so you're obviously an adult, and you need some help with taking care of yourself physically or taking care of your business affairs. All that sounds real normal. So how do we derail and end up with what has been called an abusive adult guardianship? What is that about?
Well, the thing that I see and that we have discovered is that that incapacity is not a medical description. It is a legal description. And a person going into a court can bring a letter from a doctor or can make a claim that doesn't have to necessarily have any evidence behind it, that you are incapacitated in some way. And that's the most shocking thing of all, is when you have no incapacity and yet someone petitions a court saying that you do have incapacity and that you are in need of a guardian. And then the next thing you know, there's a knock on your door and it is your new legal guardian with armed police that say, you're going to come with us. And from that point, the ramifications of that are that you now do not own your own legal identity. You cannot hire a lawyer. You cannot make any decision for your life. You cannot determine where you live, who you talk with, what you eat, what you drink, whether or not you take whatever drugs are set before you. None of those things are now your decision. You become, in essence, a piece of property that is owned by a legal guardian.
So now, let me stop you, because we want to make sure that all of our audience is following along. So the first thing you're talking about then is the abuse can start with just the label of that you lack capacity, you're incapacitated. That because that's a legal term, someone can abuse that and come in and allege that you are incapacitated when that is not medically the case, and literally take over your affairs. Now, are you saying that seniors well, let's get first, before we get started, let's get a clearer, let's get clear to our audience the perspective from which you all are addressing this. You all are, again, radio broadcast hosts, and you started addressing these topics based on personal experience. And then over the course of like 5 years, you've brought in people who have various degrees of expertise in dealing with the topic of adult guardianships, and they perhaps have undertaken certain advocacy about how those adult guardianships can be abused. Is that correct? Am I accurate so far? That's it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So over the years, and also based on your own experience, these are some of the conclusions that you have drawn about how this guardianship can be abused. So first, you have perhaps someone who's advanced age, and someone wants to, let's say you have a substantial amount of funds, and someone wants to get their hands on it. So they come in and allege that you lack capacity. You're not mentally capable of handling your own affairs, and they propose to the court that they need to do this for you. And so, and all, none of that is true. Okay, so that's one way.
Oftentimes, none of that is true.
None of that is true. So we're gonna have you at some point explain how does that even happen? Because you got a judge there, they understand the law. So how do they get away with that? Now, let's presume that you in fact do have some type of mental incapacity. Perhaps you're in the early stages or at some stage of mental dementia, because these are aging people, and so they lack mental capacity. So is everything okay at that point, or is there still potential for abuse there? How does that happen? Luanne?
Well,
you okay?
Go ahead.
Well, the thing is that you could end up into a guardianship through a hospital. You could end up in a guardianship through a neighbor saying that I'm scared for this person, that they might be alone. There's so many different ways that you could end up into a guardianship. It's not just because you're elderly. We have people that came onto a radio show that were 29 years old, 39 years old, 59 years old, all going into a guardianship of claims that these people are, that they're incapacitated and they can't take care of themselves. That is one of the ways that you can get into a guardianship.
And we all saw the Britney Spears phenomena. She certainly is not old. So you can be but so the common denominator here, we're talking about abuse of adult guardianships. We're not talking about abuses of guardianship over children. So let's draw that line. But you all, thank you for making clear that it's not necessarily the fact that you are of advanced age, even though I would imagine that if you are advanced age, that gives people some headway in alleging, they stereotype a person of advanced age and suggest that they don't have the ability to handle their business affairs. Okay, now, and Ms. Belinda, you jump in whenever you want, because I'm sure and you are CEO of Louisiana United International, which is the corporate sponsor of America United International. And we are addressing this abuse of court process as an international human rights matter. And our corporate sponsor is Louisiana United International. And again, Ms. Belinda Parker-Brown is the CEO of our corporate sponsor. So, we go in here and we know each other, and we get to talking, and we forget, people might be seeing these videos or seeing these interviews and not know the background. Okay, so now you're going into court. You got unscrupulous people who either you're not at all incapacitated or you are, but they have bad motives and they're going to get in there and abuse, they get authority over you, and you may need that assistance, but you got someone who is going to not be using their power for the interests of the people that they have the guardianship over, the ward of the court. Now,
precisely.
Again, you are a radio host, you have some personal experiences, you talk with a lot of experts. So give us your sense from that perspective. How does this happen? You got a judge there, they know the law. Certainly, they can't figure it out and make sure justice is done. What goes wrong?
Think so.
One would think so, but when you go into a court, there's absolutely no guarantee that
one of the problems is that judges have no meaningful oversight. If and when you are in a situation where a judge is making bad decisions, whether that's in error or because they're being compensated under the table somehow, or because they see their friends there in the court and they want to do them a favor, or they have political enemies that they want to deal with in the court. Those judges, if you file a complaint, we have discovered through hundreds of cases that we've studied, if you file a complaint, the percentage of those that result in any action that in any way is liable to come back on that judge is so small that it's completely insignificant. It's less than 2% that ever any action is taken. And in those cases, it's negligible as far as any kind of reprimand or on that judge. So when there is corruption, there is nothing to stop it. That judge is free to do what they want. Because then the only thing that happens is they get called before another panel of judges, and they're all scratching each other's back and saying, well, you know my secrets and I know yours. I won't tell if you don't tell. You get off this time with a warning.
Right.
Well, let me hold on for a minute, because again, certainly you all couldn't be talking about the United States of America. Ms. Belinda, they've got to have it wrong. This couldn't be happening. And tell us, explain. I mean, have you ever heard of such a thing?
Well, absolutely, Dr. Z. You know, we do a lot of court watching, and you know, this stuff is a lot like I like the way Robin puts it when especially as you you know, you go up the ladder. You know, people tell you, well, okay, you know, you've been done wrong, and the judge basically was in on it. So then now you want to appeal it. So you go and you appeal it. You know that's more money, that's more time. And then you appeal it to their friends. Like Robin said, you go on up there, you appeal it to their friends, and then their friends rubber stamp it, you know, one word denial. Okay, so now you're gonna fight that process. You're gonna go all the way up to the highest court in the land. And what it comes down to is that they all are covering up for each other, because they're not going to raise their hand and say they got it wrong. So this stuff is deliberately violating, you know, our constitutional rights. And the sad thing about it, Dr. Zena, is that so many families are suffering and being destroyed because of it.
Yeah.
We have one of the audience members, and he says, Dennis Knowles, Brother Knowles, and he says, the judicial process offers feigned protections under the color of law. And just as Frank and Jesse James, you are robbed, victimized, terrorized, and extorted. The fact is, we the masses are duped through due process. Well, you know, at this point, we're a little bit past a half hour, and you're going to have people who are going to hear this much of this interview and think, well, they couldn't, you know, we've heard from, you know, three people at this point. We've heard from an audience member, and you're going to have people saying, surely this could not be the case. But in 2018, the predecessor to America United International, our campaign called Opt-in USA, took accounts from people all across the country, because and sometimes I share this story because I remember distinctly, if you all can tell me, I remember distinctly dealing with, you know, problems in my local courts in Indiana, and I was a civil trial attorney there. And about the beginning of this century, we get on the internet, we got the internet, and you're encountering people all across the country who are talking about these nightmare experiences. They go into court with a sense of the facts, they go in there with a sense of the law, and what they find is like they're like, what is it, Alice in Wonderland.
Through the looking glass.
And then you just fall through the hole, and what you see is not fair, is not impartial. It seems to have very little to do with the law. And you have all of us going around trying to deal with our personal legal disputes and pretty much getting nowhere. Tell us the kind of accounts that you have heard about through F.A.C.E.U.S, your broadcast, about the efforts to get relief going to the various agencies. Mr. Austin started talking about that, how you make complaints against the courts and the judges, and that usually goes nowhere. Talk about that for a few minutes, and I'm gonna have Ms. Belinda share some of those, her insights on that as a leader of Louisiana United International. Tell us a bit about that.
May I?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, one of the first cases that we were directly involved in was Luanne's case. And she had a brother who was unhappy that his sisters had been put in charge of the administration of the father's estate when he died. Her mother was still alive, her father died. And he had gone to a very high-priced lawyer and spent a lot of money to get a lot of legal papers that put everything into a trust and arranged all of the affairs with wills and documents. So they thought, well, we've got it all worked out. He assigned one of the sisters to be the administrator of the trust with the mother, so they were co-administering. And the brother really didn't, he felt, well, I'm the eldest son, I should have been put in charge, and this infuriated him. So he decided he was going, he battled back and forth with them for several months and then decided, okay, I'm just going to make sure that I cause so much trouble that nobody gets anything. And he set out to do that. And the way that he did it was basically by kidnapping their mother. And he intimidated her and basically frightened her, told her a lot of lies about, I'm the only person you can trust, and convinced her through this avenue of intimidation and basically bending her arm behind her back that she had no choice but to take herself to court and sue her own trust to try to break that so that he could get at it and get a hold of it.
So now this type of experience that you're describing, and family, when it comes to inheritance, the closest of siblings, the rivalry that can come out, it can be horrible. Is this a common occurrence, or this is just something unique to, unfortunate experience that Luanne went through?
Sadly, this is probably the most common way that people wind up in these probate courts. And also, sadly, once they're in the probate courts, no one wins but the courts. Because what happened, of course, and this is what we saw, was the attorneys that he hired on her behalf sent legal papers. So the daughters went to an attorney and got some legal papers to send back. Pretty soon they were batting back and forth legal papers, and this ran up lots of big legal bills. And they started to realize this exercise doesn't end anywhere except everybody's broke and except the lawyers.
Yes.
And
well, let me, because there's so many scenarios that we can share, and I'm sure if we open up the mic for everyone in our audience, we would hear all types of horror stories. I've heard situations about wives who couldn't come in to see their husbands, that somehow someone had gotten a guardianship over the husband. Tell us a little bit about that. How does that happen?
Well, that's what you have there is a situation where a person is a guardian. There's two things: a guardian or a conservator. Conservator takes the property, the guardian takes the person, and they have control over every aspect of that person's life, and they can determine who and when that person has any visitors at all.
And so even a spouse can be excluded.
Right. A spouse, a brother, a sister, a mother, a father, a daughter, a son can all be kept out by that one person saying they're not allowed to see this person. As a matter of fact, no one is. Now that person can be completely isolated, and often is, and the courts seem to encourage this. They do not. These people do not have the kind of rights that a prisoner would in jail.
Okay, hold on for a minute, Robin, because we're trying to get a lot across to our audience. And I want to come back to what you said about the court seems to encourage that. But first, Luanne, our guest, your co-host, Marci Friedman,
Yes.
She had a similar experience where she was isolated from her mother. Tell us a bit about that, just a bit, because we're trying to get a lot in. We're just trying to get across the
Just
type
get an
of
idea.
horror stories that you have
Yeah.
encountered.
It's definitely a horror story. Marci Friedman is one of our co-hosts on Faceless Radio, and she was kept away from her mother by an in-law. They hardly ever had anything to do with her, the mother or her, and Marci went in to file for a guardianship because she figured she was already taking care of her mother. And then all of a sudden the courts got involved and started hitting a big, huge amount of money. And they kept Marci away for 7 years from her mother. Even though the court would give her every now and then, you can go see your mother, they would not enforce that. So she would go back to court. She would get another attorney. And this went on for 7 years. She finally did get to see her mother for like the last couple of weeks of her life. She finally got to where she was able to visit her. And this went on for 7 years. So they called her up one morning and said, your mother passed on. And Marci just has taken it really hard. And now she become a national advocate in this because the isolation is cruel to people. She never had to gone on with this with her mother. Nobody.
So we're talking about children. We're talking to children of the award. We're talking about spouses. And one thing I was under the impression that it was all the people who tended to get targeted were people who had accumulated a significant amount of wealth, and so you go in and you take control of their assets. But when I understand, you can be vulnerable just so someone can get access to your Medicare or Medicaid benefits. Have you seen examples of that? Tell us a bit about how that happened.
We sure have.
Give us 1 minute, Robin, and then we're going to spend the last 10 minutes talking about some solutions. Okay, go ahead.
Court predators do not care what the source of the money is. If you receive any kind of government benefits, they will exploit that and gather that check in. And if you're making $1,200 a month, they'll take $1,200 and put you somewhere that's going to cost them $200 and just keep $1,000. They don't care where the money comes from. They'll exploit anyone that has any money at all coming in from any source.
Thank you so much for giving these vivid examples. Now, again, for the people who may see this broadcast and be skeptical, let's talk again about what's happening on the international or global stage insofar as what is really trafficking of vulnerable adults, because they lose control of their life. Some of them are isolated from family members, even when you're a spouse, even when you're the child who has been adult child has been taking care of a parent, an ailing parent. So we took these accounts of these stories to the United Nations Human Rights Council in 2018. And our representation was that we were getting nowhere in the United States insofar as getting relief. It was basically a runaround. You go from court to court. Ms. Belinda talked about it earlier, and you went to agency and you saw disciplinary action, and you went to legislators, and you went to even the FBI, and there was no meaningful relief. And lo and behold, the UN Human Rights Council, through what's called the Working Group on Communications, determined that our allegations were not manifestly ill-founded. That's the terminology that they use. They determined, of course, there was no trial. They couldn't come in and say, yes, this happens. But the evidence that we presented suggested to them that to the extent there's an allegation of this type of abuse, there's no effective redress available in this country. You are basically just going to get a runaround, because an effective avenue of redress means that is relatively prompt, is fair, they're competent, and when it's appropriate, people get compensation, if necessary, reparations, and they determine, lo and behold, with regard to the United States of America, not some third world country, that does not happen in this country. Sure, Some people win. Britney Spears managed to get out of, you know, her guardianship. But you know, it's rare. You know, you have to pretty much be Britney Spears in order to prevail. Miss Belinda?
Yeah.
Sadly.
Absolutely, Dr. Z. You know, I want to make it clear, because when we talk about the abuse, you know, we got so many things going on here, but we want to say it's the weaponization of this corrupt legal system. And people are being weaponized by it. People are being, you know, bullied by it. People lives are being destroyed because of it. And what we're saying is that, you know, you literally go in there with the trust, you know, of that the court system is going to work. I mean, it's going to work the way it has been created to work for us. And we're feeling though, you get a lawyer, you know, you put all your evidence out there, you know, you make everything clear, crystal clear about your situation. But the truth of the matter is, they're not looking to determine whether or not you know, if the evidence is going to is going to work. If the evidence there is the proof that they need to show that these things should not be happening to you. They don't care about the evidence, because the judge is in cahoots with the lawyer, the prosecutor, the sheriff, the DA. You know, all of this, then it becomes like you know, all about the politicians and the money and who gonna get paid and who gonna, you know, cover up for who. And that's what's been happening. So we're saying that it's a fix. It's a fix because we know you shouldn't have lost your case. We know that you should have won. Okay. But the truth of the matter is that the fix was in, and they had already determined, they had already made a decision that this insurance company that you're suing, okay, has already given us a campaign donation, and we're on the insurance company side, so you're gonna lose. It don't matter what you do.
Yeah, so we're gonna shift to talking about the solution, because we identified this problem, and we in 2018 the United Nations agreed with us that the allegation that this kind of stuff happens is not manifestly founded. So that means, you know, they're just, you know, they're not just making this up. It's just not nonsense. So if anybody is listening to this interview, that has been determined by the United Nations Human Rights Council. But what they also determined is that there's no effective redress. So it took until January of last year, and the Trump administration basically said, yeah, you know, we acknowledge all that. We acknowledge that this could very well, you know, this is happening, that there's not adequate accountability among the judges. But guess what? We have other pressing priorities as a nation, and we're not going to deal with it. And, you know, the United Nations said that they wouldn't take the matter any further because they wanted more evidence that this was affecting what they call a gross pattern, and they don't tell you what that means. So they want to know, sure, they understand it affects people, but they need to see that it's really widespread. And the problem with that is, in a country of 300 million people, they don't want to know. The UN is not saying bring us a bunch of people who are prepared to make this allegation. They are saying bring us people who are reliable, who are credible, who can attest that they were subjected to this fix. And in a country of 300 million people, how many people does that need to be? You know, 3,000, 30,000, 300,000, 3 million. So this is the quandary they put us in. And as grassroots organizations, who most of us are trying to survive this travesty, it would take a small country to pull together that level of proof. So we went to President Biden in June of last year, and he says, we tell him that is on Miss Belinda and I's signature on behalf of the predecessor to America United International, because as of June of 2021, American United International hasn't launched yet. And we say, you know, it's treasonous to say that as a country, you don't have time to protect us because you have other things to do. Because remember, in this country, you know that you can't have classes of citizens, some of which can get effective redress and others who can't. You know, so you're basically saying, if you got some other type of legal dispute, we will make sure you have a fair and impartial experience with our courts. But if you come in here talking about the judges corrupt and the fixes in, we don't have time to deal with that, even though we recognize that that does happen. So we reminded President Biden about that document called the U.S. Constitution that says, you know, all American citizens get the privileges and immunities of their citizenship, and you can't, you know, create these, you know, classes of citizens. And we never heard about him. We never heard back. There was never even an acknowledgement of the correspondence. So that's, now I'm getting to America United International. It launched in October of last year. And one of the first things it did was ask that the International Criminal Court investigate President Biden, because to sit back, know that this is happening in our courts, know that your citizens are not being protected, that is as much a crime against humanity under international human rights law as the courts and the judges who are in directly on the problem. So we got an audit. Now I know we rushed that presentation, but Luanne and Robin, you know, Ms. Belinda has been on your program talking about it. I've been on the program talking about it. Brian Kenter has been on the program talking about it. So I'm going to read you a question we got from Brian Kenter. And, you know, we all know Brian Kenter. Everyone who sees his video may not know him, but he is like one of the leading champions of bringing about a fair and impartial administration in this country. And so he asked, Luanne and Robin, would you agree that the relief we seek will never, mean, you know, fair and impartial court hearings, that will never be obtained without the efforts of America United International applying pressure on the international basis? Do you understand the question? And can you take a few minutes to give a shot at answering it?
Yes, absolutely. I think he's absolutely right. I have the utmost respect for Mr. Kenter, and I absolutely agree. I think that the institutional problems that we see in the all aspects of the government, really, but specifically the judicial branch, are so entrenched and widespread that it is not something that and we have also made many times. We've been before state legislatures, and we brought things before federal government agents to see changes in laws and to see changes. The problem being, you can write all the laws you want, but if you've got judges that are not held to it, there's no accountability. I think that he's absolutely right, that we are in a position now where there really is not going to be meaningful recourse for American citizens without getting the international community
global outcry,
aware of and involved in addressing the problem. Not only that, but it is not just a problem in the United States.
Yes.
We have had enough guests and enough callers and enough listeners on our radio show that have shared with us their stories, that we know that this is worldwide. There are many places where there's rampant injustice in the courts, that the average person on the street is victimized in these courts by absolutely criminal elements. And I make this point, and I make it as strong in no uncertain terms, because if we do not call it what it is,
yes,
then if we soften it somehow, and pretend that
Yeah.
because these people are in suits and ties and nice outfits, and we do not, you have to call it what it is, and it is criminal activity. If you or I were engaged in stealing people from their homes and taking everything that they own for ourselves and dividing it among our friends and isolating them and ultimately drugging them to death after we separated them from their entire family and held them for several years and extorted money from that family, those are crimes. And we rightfully need to be held accountable for those crimes.
Now let me stop you, Robin. And it's not out of lack of interest what you're saying. I just want to be conscious of the time.
Very good what he's saying. Right.
It's absolutely true. And we have to have the global outcry because this, you're saying that this is happening around the world, but it's only in the United States that we have the gold standard. Our legal system is the world's gold standard for a fair and impartial administration of justice. And that's the point I want to make. Well, we're at a 1 minute past the hour. We need to go ahead and wrap up. Again, wonderful discussion. We're going to have to take it up again, but for the sake of respecting everybody's time, Ms. Belinda, why don't you close us out? And thank you so much, Luanne and Robin. I mean, if you all are feeling yes, that.
There at the end, Robin was really getting fired up. I mean, he hit some very crucial points, and I would like to thank Brian Kinder for that question, because people are tired of chasing the rabbit, and what we're saying that we're not going to ask permission. Our Constitution have already put it in writing that our government is supposed to protect us. Our government is supposed to protect us at home and abroad. And what we're saying that this is crimes against humanity. I mean, Robin just put the nail in the coffin when we have to call it like it is. And what we're saying, because of these atrocities and this tyranny that is being put up on us as a people in the United States of America, AUI is saying time out. Code blue, the red button push, that we're not going to be weaponized by this America's, this organized crime that's going on in our legal system. And we're saying we need a FEMA. We're using that term FEMA because FEMA is a federal emergency agency that will come in, that would be set up so that we can go somewhere to go to. Because right now we don't have adequate redress. We don't have nowhere to turn when these type of things are happening to us. And we're saying that we're not going to let it be a smoke screen. You're not going to put up a dog and pony show. We're not going to jump through the hoops. We're saying we need this now, and we can't wait for it, because families are suffering. People are committing suicide, getting their kids taken away from them, being told to report to prison. And this is just outrageous. And we're saying enough is enough. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. I would love to have Belinda, the opportunity to invite our guests to come back, Dr. Z.
Yes, and I just the chief of operations. I'm the assistant chief of operations, and now we're going to know why they pay the chief of operations the big bucks. She just told me to provide the AUI website and contact information. So we're at www.americaunitedinternational.net. Okay, and you can contact us through the website americaunitedinternational.net, and we can share a phone number. But I want to make clear, the international, our community, we're a community of persecuted people. And so it's difficult to get us to fill the streets, hundreds of thousands of people, the Occupy movement, the Tea Party, the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement. And the global community has tried to use our numbers against us, because you have to realize we're competing with people all around the world who, it's common occurrence for their government to be beating up on the citizens, to be literally brutalizing the citizens. And we have to compete with that. And there's an impression internationally that, you know, the Americans, our worst problems, we still got it really good. So we have a small window of opportunity to convince the global community that the problem is serious, that it has an intergenerational effect, and as a result, there's literally multi-millions of U.S. citizens and non-citizens residents who have having their lives devastated because of this U.S. court abuse. So come to our website, like us on Facebook. You can access our Facebook pages. We just recently created a private network because, big tech, we have to deal with the censoring, and we've got to make sure that the people in our community are hearing our messages. So we have our own Facebook just for people who are dealing with this legal system corruption, and we encourage people to join it so that you will know what's going on, because we have a small window of opportunity to convince these global agencies, including the International Criminal Court, that we need help. Now, this has been going on for decades. We need to gear up now. We cannot miss this opportunity. We cannot miss the opportunity to get help from these global bodies, because they're under this false impression that it's not really happening to many of us, and it's not that serious, and people in other countries are experiencing worse problems. So we're going to be doing some things. We want to even establish that the delay, that what has happened since we first wrote President Biden on June 15, 2021. We plan on starting a campaign that shows the suffering that has happened even since June of last year. So we need everybody to galvanize and connect with us, if at the very least just to get updated on what's going on. So www.americaunitedinternational.net. You can contact us through the website. It has our email. You can reach us through info@launitedi.org. It's LA for Louisiana, United, I for international.org. But connect with us, because it's time. We've got to convince them, because we don't want to have another 30 to 60 to 90 days of us being quiet and then getting letters from these global agencies saying, well, we can't get involved because we're not convinced that this is a big enough problem. Okay, so we're 7 minutes after the hour. We're really imposing on our audience. They've been a great audience. I wish I could share with you all the comments that they've making. It's experts obviously in our audience. Again, Luanne, Robin, I'm going to give you, maybe about 30 seconds to share some closing remarks. Then I'll turn it back over to Ms. Belinda to really wrap us up, and then we're going to get out of people's Monday evening so they can get ready for work tomorrow. Luanne and Robin, unmute yourself and give us a few closing remarks for about 30 or so seconds.
Okay, I'll start first. I really think it's a crime against anybody in this country that prisoners have more rights than the people that are our wards that are being forced into guardianship. There needs to be a discrimination lawsuit against that, because these wards have more rights than anybody. The only crime that they have is being, they have dementia or they're not incapacitated. That's the only crime that has happened to them, and it shouldn't be happening in this country.
And I will just say, the answer is us. There's no government agency that's going to step in and make any difference in this. It is going to come because people get together and decide, I will not live in a country where this kind of thing is allowed. This is our America. This is our world. We have as much right as anyone to speak our minds and make changes in our society and culture. Let us do so. Reach into your spirit and draw out that light and let it enlighten the world.
And let them come face us, period.
There you go. Beautiful. Miss Belinda?
Well, absolutely. You know, and that's what AUI is all about. And that's the reason why we're saying that everything we should be doing right now should be layered with AUI, because we have, no one have, you know, made this can't move to be, put the pressure on our president. And we're saying that all of us together, united together, we can't lose. We are going to win. This is going to be a historic moment. This is a opportunity, you know, that we have right now, a winner, like Dr. Z said, to put the pressure on our government that they cannot just stand by there with their hands crossed and their arms fold and watch these type of crimes happen to our citizens here in the United States of America. So again, we are crying out for a public outcry for people to join up and support us to become ambassadors in this campaign, to not only you know, tell your, you know, bring your stories, bring your interviews, be a part of F.A.C.E.U.S you know, broadcast where more people and more people are exposing this type of treatment, you know. So it's time, people, it's time for us to unite and join up. We're going to win this fight because we're right. So thank you so much again for joining us, and we really appreciate everybody, and we hope to have you all back soon.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.